Alright, welcome back. So right now we're going to be looking at how we can apply these sector graphs to real world scenarios and see if we can get some useful information out of them. So for our first one, we're going to be looking at two separate sector graphs. Here we have Sophia's sector graph and we have Ethan's sector graph, and we'll be using this information in order to solve a few questions. So let's get started with which student spends more time on physical activity or sport? So if we look back at both of these sector graphs, we can see that comparing the percentage of sport for Sophia and the percentage of sport in after school time for Ethan, we see that Ethan does 20% of his after school time in sport and Sophia does 25%. So the answer here is Sophia. Sophia spends more of after school time as a percentage than Ethan does. Alright, B. Who spends more time on creative or intellectual activities like reading, homework, and music? Okay, so looking back at the graphs, we have for Sophia, her reading is going to be 25% and her homework is going to be 33%. So Sophia is going to be spending 33 plus 25 of her time on intellectual activities. Okay, so she's spending 58% of her time after school on intellectual activities, whereas Ethan is spending you can see he's spending 20% on homework and he's spending 30% on music. So he spends 50% of his time on intellectual activities after school. So the answer here again is Sophia. Okay, for C, now we've told that Sophia has 2 hours in which she does all these activities, whereas Ethan has 3. So how does this change our answers to A and B? So what we need to do is we need to work out basically from our first one what 25% is out of 2 hours, and then 25 do the same for the next one. We need to really apply those percentages to the amount of hours. So if we start off with Sophia and her sport, the amount of time she spends is going to be equal to her percentage spent of sport, so 25% multiplied by the amount of time she has in the afternoon, which is 2 hours. Okay, and we can convert this to a decimal and do 0.25 times 2, and what this equals is going to be 0.5 hours or 30 minutes, so half an hour she spends on sport, whereas Ethan's sport is going to be equal to instead of 0.25, it's going to be 0.2 multiplied by 3 hours. Okay, and 0.2 multiplied by 3 hours is just going to be 20% of 3 hours. And that is just 0.6 hours. Alright, is spent for Ethan on sport. So ultimately, Ethan spends more time on sport overall, and proportionally, Sophia spends more time on her sport initially in a percentage wise. Okay, now let's look at how much time they spend on intellectual activities. So we calculated for the first one that Sophia spends 58% of her time on intellectual activities. So let's do 0.58 times her 2 hours. Okay, so we get 1.18 hours, and then that's for Sophia, and then for Ethan, he's gonna spend 50% of his time and that's just going to be equal to 0.5 times 3 hours, which is equal to 1.5 hours. Okay, so what happens is at the end for C, it's that Ethan does more in terms of intellectual activity and he does more in terms of sport as well. Alright, that's it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.